Hello, everyone. It's Soraya, the host of the Purposeful Professional podcast. As you probably might know by now, I love having meaningful conversations. However, I really love having meaningful conversations on our identities. I really do like the word identity. It's the name of the nonprofit I founded last year. But the word identity is special to me. Why? Because our identities shape who we are. And sometimes, not even sometimes, but oftentimes, who we can become. However, there are those special people who transcend their identities and shatter boundaries. We often say they've broken the glass ceiling or they've blazed a trail. What is unique about the individuals who do set the trends? Well, I think you and I both know that they break the rules and redefine them themselves. So please, if you're on that type of energy where you want to break the ceilings and set the trends, then you need to listen to this episode on why well-behaved women don't make history, the power of charting your dreams and following your own path. Listen up for this conversation between myself and Prakriti as we discuss gender identity, being a woman with big dreams, and exactly why well-behaved women don't make history. Enjoy this episode. Hello, everyone, and good morning. Welcome to the Purposeful Professional podcast. Today, I have a very special guest with me, Prakriti, and we're going to be talking about why well-behaved women don't make history. Prakriti, introduce yourself to the people on the podcast.
Hi everyone, I am Prakriti from Nepal. Before I would like to introduce myself, I just had a kind of realization just now that this is my first podcast and it has been founded and hosted by a woman, and I feel more powerful to be here today. So first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to it. I am Prakriti Bashal. I am from Nepal and I'm 25 years old, and currently I'm working in the area of policy as a researcher and program manager. On top of that, I have various experiences. Academically, I have background in international relations and peace studies. I studied from Japan in Ritsumeikan in Asia Pacific University, and and along with that, I have various kind of experiences of being an artist, being a dancer by passion, I would say, more than professional, and sometime I work as a content creator as well. So right now, I've been working in the area of policy in Nepal.
Okay. I feel like, woo, okay. I want to just clap for all of that because that's a really great rundown of number one, like who you are, but number two, what you do. I love that, like dancer by passion, not profession. I really loved how you introduced yourself, and I think it's really great that you're here for this topic. Well-behaved women don't make history, right? Like, so we have to really put ourselves forward and really try everything we can, and jump outside of the box. And I think that your life really represents that. I'm shocked this is your first podcast, but I'm also grateful because I rarely meet people that they're like, oh, this is the first time I've ever been, on a podcast. So that's great. Yay. Okay. We're the first podcast. All right. So I want to just get straight to it. I want to get straight into the meat of this conversation. I remember in our pre-call, you told me that you have a challenging spirit. So when you think of like having a challenging spirit, especially as a woman, why do you define yourself as that? And then what does it mean to you?
Right. Yeah, I like usually when people talk to me about like few traits and competency that defines who I am, I come up with like challenging spirit as one of them. It's mostly because of how I've been raised up, where I have been raised up, the society I live in, and for somebody living in a society like Nepal, I believe most of us, like I would say, most of us need to have this spirit. And if I am to recall, like when you said like about challenging spirit, how does this define me? And then I would go back to like few episodes in my life that really encouraged me to have this kind of competency. First of all, would be like regarding my own personal development. Um, as a child, I would say that I had speech impediment. So most of my childhood, I was very shy, and then but at the same time, I was really exposing myself with a lot of opportunities that would allow me to just speak out loud in the public. And that was something I believe as a child that I was like, I really pushed myself forward in doing that. And one of the ways that I thing I did was like just like speaking in front of the mirror. And but before that, I would be in like a speech competitions, like oratory competitions, and I would like start my sentence, start my speech, and then at the end, at somewhere in the middle, I just couldn't express myself because of my condition, and then I would stop. But at coming back home, I would make sure that I would practice that again and again. So so I believe from child, because of that particular condition, I had this like challenging spirit, and which eventually like kept on developing being an adult, and especially because, as I mentioned earlier, becoming like being a Nepali woman in Nepali society, especially where I am so much bounded by patriarchal norms, practices from like some crazy practices that I still am shocked that we follow to this date. So I would say like these are a few things that really built a challenging spirit in me.
Yeah. No, I love how you talked about your challenging spirit was built from overcoming that speech impediment. Because I think we all have this struggle that we might have early in life. It might be a childhood struggle, shyness, it might be like not as much confidence. But I love how you practice that. And it really shows that you can practice the skills, you can develop any skill you need. I always believe in that to be successful. So that's definitely great. I want to go deeper into this point of like the patriarchal society. I really love that you talked about having a challenging spirit because I think a lot of women don't have a challenging spirit. And even in the United States, where you could say like here, women are very liberal, we're very out there. We still don't necessarily have this challenging spirit and this ability to, I guess, step up and lead in the areas of gender equality or in any area that we're passionate about. So I love to know like were there any struggles in developing that sort of spirit in the society that you were in, like, in the Nepali society?
That is actually really nice that everybody needs to have this challenging spirit. And I believe globally women needs to have this because still if we look into the global aspect, we're still behind and where the where our fellow men are, right? So
Mm,
um okay. So I would say, first of all, when you are challenging, you're not shy, you're outspoken, you are expressing yourself way too much then, which is by the standard of what a woman is defined. And when I was like, I have found myself like exploring to so many opportunities, so many like different kind of experiences, whether it was in Nepal or if it was in Japan. Like most of the time, people would have like remind me that as a woman you need to be shy, you need to be like kind, you need to be more stable, stop being too dynamic and experimenting all these things. You need to already have a career, and you need to know that this is a career that you'll be like processing like the way forward, because you would have to start planning your family. There's so many things. Like I think the most of the struggle that I face is like people constantly reminding me that act like women, act like a woman. I, I really hated when I was reminded this like with every decision I made. So yeah, that is something I would say is a struggle that I faced throughout.
yeah, no, but that's, the one thing that I really loved about talking with you, and I really love this, just honestly being in the Lead Next Fellowship and being able to speak to a lot of the fellows from Asia, is that our experiences are actually not that different. And I think it's kind of sad because I think all of us have heard that, be like a woman, act like a woman, when in reality, I don't know if there's one way to act like a woman. And I hate that sometimes we're limited, and that's this whole thing of like well-behaved women don't make history. It's because if you want to be dynamic, like you talked about, you're going to have to experiment. You're going to have to go out there and try new things. Even that like that shy meekness, I wouldn't even say that's necessarily limited to the Asian continent. That's like an entire global feminine ideal, be very meek, be very shy, be very kind. And I'm not saying that it's not nice to be those things, but I think where do you go as a woman if you don't fit into those boxes? Because a lot of us don't. So I'm glad that you understood the need to be yourself and the need to
Right,
have an identity that is your own.
right. I have this sort of conversation with like so many of my cousin, my junior at school, like, hey, just be yourself. be what you want to be. Don't put yourself inside the box. As you said, like we are expected to put ourselves inside the box, and that is where everything is wrong. And that is why I emphasize on having competencies like challenging spirit, like teaching your daughter to challenge, to like, to be able to take all this risk in life, to be able to switch between careers, to be able to experiment what is around. It's something that I don't think a lot of parents actually teach their daughter as well.
Yeah. I feel like because it's this thing about a woman being a comforter, or and I always say as women, we're taught to define ourselves and what we can do for other people. So for
Right.
example, when you ask a woman, who are you? We say mother, daughter, sister,
Mhm.
friend. But how we define ourselves is so relational. So when we feel like we let down the people in our lives, it can be hard for us to take these risks because it's like, oh, well, everyone expects me to be stable, meek, a comforter, there for other people. And like I said, like this relational expectation that a woman is designed to serve the needs of those around her, sometimes that limits us, you know?
That's
Mm-hmm.
true.
All
I
right.
agree.
So what would you say? You talked about speaking to like younger friends or younger family members who are struggling with their voice. Like what would you say to a young woman in Nepal who is struggling with finding her voice? What would you tell her?
Yeah, I would say most of the women that I've met, they're struggling to find their voice. First of all, we are not even asked to have a voice at all, right? Um,
Mm,
Kind of like a context of what our culture looks like to what extent we are behind, as a woman, as an agent in the society, is that, let me ask you, like, have you heard of something called menstrual taboos?
honestly, no. I've never heard that of that. That's how American I am. No, I've never heard of that. If you could explain,
Maybe,
that'd be great.
maybe most of us like have not actually heard of it. It's really common in South Asia, I would say. Like, can you imagine when you are in your period, you are not allowed to go to kitchen, you're not allowed to go to temple, you're not allowed, sometimes you're not even allowed to touch men. And those kind of practices are still in Nepal. Although I grew up in city, most part of my life. But as a child, I was asked to follow those kind of practices, and then so that is the context. So from a child, I was taught to like, okay, I gotta follow this practice because as a woman, this is what is happening to my body, and nobody taught me that this was natural or this was like this
Mhm.
is what it's supposed to be. Nobody taught me like the only thing that I was taught was like you're impure when you're in a period, so you gotta like create a distance. You're not gonna go to the kitchen because it's unhygienic. Those kind of narratives were taught to me, and that eventually would like you know would kind of instill an idea in you that you don't have a voice, you don't have a saying in these kind of stuff. And that's one of the reason like a lot of women struggle to find their voice. And then when I meet like all these like new people, like my colleague or my friend, especially my juniors who seems to really navigating through their career at this point, I just tell them that don't listen to people, try to speak up for yourself, don't try to follow the path that belonged to somebody else, because that's what we are taught, like, okay, be like this, act like this. So I always tell them these sort of things like, okay, just be yourself and try to explore yourself around this journey, because you don't even know what are you good at. You don't even know what is your purpose in your life. Even to this date, I am 25 years old. I have experience living abroad. I have experience in different cities within my country. I have experience of like different kind of jobs, different kind of skills. But even at this point, I usually ask myself like, what is my real purpose, and where am I headed to? And that's why I put out myself there. I try to explore, and that's the message that I give it to everyone. Explore, explore, explore.
Yeah. Whoa. Okay. First and foremost, on the menstrual taboo thing. To be honest, I was shocked because I'm like, they're taking something that is a natural bodily pattern, a natural cyclical pattern in the body, and making that taboo. So it just
Right.
shows me how oftentimes I think coming from my perspective, we don't understand how much privilege we have and that things like this, while we still might be fighting for, I think they call it like period equity, or they have a different name for it here. We're still fighting for our needs to be validated. It never was that point where, we would actually be told not to go in front of men. We would be told to stand in a corner. It never was like that. So I think I just want to empathize with you in that moment, and I'll also celebrate you for becoming the woman that you've become in spite of those sort of taboos and those sort of limitations placed on women. I also want to echo what you said about helping other people to find themselves. I think that's the key of life. And I love how you talked about trying on different passions and different career paths. I think we don't do that enough. And I think it's this, I would say it's this archetype of a responsible daughter, of like, I want to be the good daughter to society. I want to do what the society tells me to do. I want to be a good daughter to my parents. I want to do the career they want for me. I want to be I think someone said that, like, to be a woman is to be in the state of an archetypal daughter. You're always looking to someone for guidance, whether it's the patriarchy, is your father, your actual father, your mother. So I love the fact that you're telling people, like, hey, I have these experiences and I'm breaking out of this daughter mold to define myself as myself and not necessarily in relation to someone else. That's great. So I want to talk about those passions that you have, right? Alongside this spirit of being a challenger, right? We talked about being a challenger, you seeing the patriarchal norms and wanting more for yourself and for other women. You have this spirit of multifacetedness that I think also flavors it pretty well. I always say every activist advocate has to be multifaceted. The movement requires it, right? So can you describe your many interests and talents to me?
I am artist by heart. Not much people know about it actually. Not even a friend who have met me, who have went out, drank with me. They don't even know that I am artist by heart because there's something that is so dear to me. I don't feel the importance to like say it out loud. I have, especially my artist part, like the artist face of mine was more unveiled while I was in Japan. And I would say it was mostly because I was living a very independent life in Japan. And I have my art displayed in several exhibitions in Japan, which was based in the prefecture that I lived, so more like local level. And I am more of an abstract artist, and I was also interviewed by NHK. It's a national level television channel in Japan, and I was interviewed by them on one of the art that I that was about the gender equality. It was a portrayal of gender equality. And yes, artist is something that I am by my heart. And on top of that, I love to create. So I'm also a content creator. And I have been content creator for different platforms. Even to this date, I am creating video contents, and then also some like posts like Instagram content for especially inclined toward the civic engagement, sending like consumable content to the people for the audience to understand what is happening in Nepal, and what are the news that is important for especially youth to be updated with. Um, and again, I'm also a researcher. I love to research as I have it's because I'm too curious. I feel like when I research, I just go in depth of research. I love to learn new stuff, and research has been turned into my professional career at this point. I have been working as a policy researcher in Nepal, and I wouldn't say I am a very established in this area. I have just started. It's been 1.5 year working in the area of public policy as a researcher, and also like managing the program that revolved around the public policy research. And while doing the research, I worked with Ministry of Communication and Information Technology, and I wrote a paper for them, and I wrote policy brief, mostly revolving around the policy dictating the gender equality in Nepal. Um, yeah, I would say on top of my head, my mind, those are the things that I can remember right now.
Yeah, no, I can relate to this thing of like when people ask me what I do and who I am. It
Yeah.
takes me a while to be able to actually think about everything I've done. And I think that's a testament to like how forward thinking you are, because
Mhm.
it seems as if you never rest on your laurels whenever you feel like there's an area that you can expand in. And that's that creator mindset, right? That's that artist mindset, I think. Um, I love how you talked about how you are an artist at heart, but that people don't know that. I think a lot of us experience that. We experience this thing of, hey, I secretly like to draw, or I secretly like to dance, but because my job is very analytical, my job is very research based, my job is very business based, or very like I have a serious job. People don't see that part of you, and I always love the like the secret artist. I love those people because I feel like it shows that there's depth beneath what people think is honestly just surface level. Um, I think that's really, really great. And then I love how you're able to apply your interest in research as well to gender equality, which is something you're passionate about. So, overall, I feel like you talked about purpose on the podcast. I see the threads of your purpose from what you've described to me. I see someone that really wants to go out there and create change with anything at their disposal, whether it's art, social media, research. So in that way, you're truly interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary, right? And I think that's a beautiful thing. That's what I'm striving for. So
Yeah.
that's a beautiful,
That's a
beautiful thing. So yeah. All right.
yeah,
Let's see.
that's a really beautiful way of putting it. Nobody has done that before to me. You know, talking with you, I'm also reflecting my own journey and trying to know who I am. And this is very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I no, I relate to that. So when people ask me what I do, like, okay, so I'm a writer, but I'm also an entrepreneur, but I'm also trying to do this hosting thing. Like I have so many different things that I'm trying to do, but I always say the thread between all of them is that I'm trying to use my voice, use who I am to make a difference in the world. And
Yeah.
I try not to get like more specific than that because I don't want to limit myself. But I would say that's my mission statement. That's my purpose statement. That's my manifesto. You know, they have different words. They have different
That's
words for these statements. It's like it's just going out there and doing whatever I can do, however I can benefit the world. Like I've just learned, now I'm learning like user experience design. So now I'm learning design, and like I feel like I'm in this state of expansion. So I definitely can relate to you and feeling like, there's so many different paths, but they're all united by this passion. So it's like multidisciplinary because I see one thing in multiple lenses, but it's interdisciplinary because I do different things. I see different causes in different ways. I serve different movements in different ways. So I love that. All right. So how are you able to become multifaceted in a society that often places women in boxes?
it's very interesting. I would say my curiosity, you know, and also I have always felt very connected to the communities that I've lived in the past. I have a first-hand experience of like living in a village area and then moving to city when I was a child, and I have seen a lot of differences. And then I realized that I resonate with the communities, and I have always felt like there's something that I can give back to the community who have provided me, who have nurtured me to become who I am today. And on doing so, I've always been so curious. I've been so curious, and that is, I believe, one of the reason why I have this the way you have been describing me. Um, yeah, so I would basically say it's because of the curiosity that I have within me.
Yeah. But I think there's this thing of like curiosity being necessary to break barriers. And I feel like the truly curious are the ones that start asking themselves, hey, why do we have menstrual taboos? Why do we have this? And then from there, you begin to see the different possibilities. I always say, like, when our creativity and our curiosity is taken from us, the human spirit cannot thrive,
Right.
because that curiosity, yeah, no, that's true. Like that curiosity pushes us to go out there and see things in a different way. And I think that's what's pushed you to develop these multiple skills, multiple talents, multiple gifts. Even to notice them within yourself takes curiosity. I think that I always say I'm not afraid to try things. And I think that that's how curiosity shows up in my life. Like not being afraid to try things because I know that I might try this thing and I might really be good at it. And even if I'm not good at it, I can learn and become proficient like I had to. So I'm 22. So I just came out of college like last year and I had to learn how to I had to learn how to bring that childlike curiosity back into my life. Because when I came out of school, the path was not linear. I wish I could say, oh, come out of school, get a job, retire at 40. That's not what I wanted for myself. So I was faced with how do I build a career that exemplifies who I am at the highest level? I'm gonna have to be curious. I'm gonna have to try things that I've never tried before. And it got me really uncomfortable very quickly. Like I got very uncomfortable very quickly. But I think like you, it's my curiosity that pushed me forward. They always say curiosity killed the cat. Well, you know what? I'm going to let my curiosity kill the cat, but I'm going to get that experience. And I think my family, they might not say I have a challenging spirit, but they say I have an adventurous spirit and that I'm always trying to see new places and do new things. And I think that's something that I want to keep within myself. So I love to talk to people who have that,
And
as
which is
well.
which is very wonderful. You need to, when you are working for like to create a change, to create an impact, I think you need to understand it from a different perspective. In order to be understand from different perspective, you need to be curious so that you don't make a mistake. You don't leave out one community. Uh, you don't leave out one of the very important component of the change that you're trying to make. So I think it's lovely what you're doing.
Yeah, no, but we know that change is hard. Like
Yeah.
we know that change is absolutely hard, but yes, change is driven by curiosity. Like at the highest level, things are changed because someone was curious enough to say, "Wait, there can be a better way." Or I
Right.
don't think women are being treated fairly, or I don't think that this is equitable. I don't think that this is inclusive. Like, and I think that's curiosity being able to look beneath the surface or go farther than where people will want to go. Speaking of curious, I think one of the most curious people I think is really Malala. I feel like her story, I mean, I don't know if they call it like the shot heard around the world, but her story really just resonated very powerful with me growing up, just learning about her and learning about how she stood up to the Taliban and did what she did. Especially at such a young age, I was like, oh my God, so you're telling me I'm scared to give a speech in school. And this girl stood up to the Taliban and said, no, girls deserve to go to school. So I from then I was like, you know what? I need to pull on like the strength of women like her. I need to have these like Malala moments. I need to have like a moment in my life where I'm brave enough to go against something that I feel like proverbially might, how would I say this, figuratively kill me, like might figuratively result in my, undoing or my embarrassment or my failure. And I really think about her and how young she was, but how courageous she was. So when I was reading over your information and when I was talking with you before this call, I was like, you know what? Something about you really reminds me of her. And she kind of came up in my mind. And I would love to know, like, Malala stood up to the Taliban. She had this society and this, I guess you could call it toxic patriarchy, like how we say toxic masculinity in America. She had this like toxic patriarchy, telling her that she didn't deserve to go to school in spite of her intelligence and her wisdom and her proficiency. So what was your Malala moment? Like, what was the moment where you stood up to something? You knew you had to stand up for yourself and the patriarchal society you were immersed in and be the change.
As I mentioned it before, that as a women we are expected to trace the path that is being like created by societal norms, and coming out of that, standing up for yourself, demanding for things that you want in your life, demanding for the change is something that I've done a very long time ago, and I would say around 2016, and I'm still amazed that a person who had just come out of the high school could demand such thing in front of my parents. My Malala moment would be when I decided to study abroad in Japan, and that was entirely my decision because I would say most of the time for what we decide and who we are is defined by societal norms and defined by the normal practices that is going around. So at this point in 2016, I decided that I want to study abroad. I realized that curious enough is not okay. It's not gonna. balance the ecosystem within me. I have to have experience to understand what is normal, what does a normal society look, maybe what does a normal policy looks, a normal practices looks in a different part of the world. And I decided that if I am to know more about myself, if I am to you know excel in this field of creating impact for the people, I have to step out of my comfort zone. And that was like studying abroad. And the way I did was like, I didn't even tell my parents I was planning to study abroad. I was somebody who was preparing for the med school. Not just preparing, I had actually got score that was enough for me to get enrolled into any med school in Nepal. And my parents were like, okay, this girl is about to go to med school, which is good. Something that is very much highly appreciated by South Asian or even Asian parents in general. So, but instead of that, I shifted to social science and I got into this university in Japan. And I didn't tell my parents because I knew for a fact that they are going to be against it. So I had to show them something. I had to show them that, look, I've been accepted. I've been accepted with a good scholarship. And I'm not just joking about like, going from science to social science. I am serious about this because I feel like I have acumen, what is required to be in this area of work, in this area of studies. And um, that's what I did actually. And I believe that from that point onward, um, entirely all the decision that has been made is by entirely made by me. All the decision I have made in my life, whether I want to have a job in this particular area or not, whether I want to quit my job, if I want to travel somewhere, if I want to have this circle of friends, and everything, from that point onward, everything has I am the one who is making all my decision, and this is very odd for a Nepali society, for a Nepali women in a society like ours. And even to this date, my friends still get shocked that how could somebody who was very shy at that time in your life could, demand something that really mattered to you. And that was, I would say, is a Malala moment to me.
Yeah, no, because it's always this moment of like, hey, I decided that I want to see something different. And that it goes all the way back to the curiosity we were talking about. It's this moment of, I've decided I want to see something different. And I've decided that I want different for myself. And I think that's what Japan was able to give you. This opportunity to see something different. I want to know though, because I feel like all like I don't want to say like all people of color go through this, but I truly think like worldwide, everybody's parents want them to be a doctor. And the med school thing, like so you got this acceptance in med school, but you ended up changing to social policy. Um I want to delve deeper into that. Like, describe that transition. Like, what made you make that decision? And then also, how did you deal with the reactions of other people? Now you're in Japan, you have this agency, but you're still very much dealing with, the reactions of family and stuff. And I think when we're younger, we care so much about like what other people think sometimes. So how did you deal with that? How did you make that transition successfully?
First of all was like discovering myself, knowing that if this is a field that I want to pursue, which was I would say the most difficult task for me because from school I went to a high school that trained me to be doctor or engineer. There were just like two options that were given to me by the high school that I went. And this particular high school also always brought like, guest speaker, like career guest speaker who were just doctor or either engineers, like there were nobody else, right? But then I found myself always very passionate about society, about people, and then I've always found myself very excited when I read the newspaper that has so many news of what is happening in my society. And then again, I also lived in various part of Nepal where I had a first-hand experience of what the poverty looked like. I had first-hand experience of what is like to be underprivileged from like all this like education, basic healthcare, and I have an experience of living in a city, and those all things combined together to make me very aware from a very childhood age about what is happening around. And I would say that I was always very passionate about social science. I was always passionate about politics and policies and all these things. But the institutions that are in Nepal, the education institution, that is something that had diverted me for a while. I would say that, well, because getting into like the exam from mid school is not easy. I know I studied very hard, but I felt like that was the right path, right? But after I completed my med school, I remember just like traveling to somewhere solo. I asked my parents, "Hey, I want to travel because I've been like studying for so long. I want to travel somewhere." And I traveled to this like not too far city. Then I realized, oh my God, how much how much connected I felt when I was like, again experiencing looking at after how people um were living in their communities and how a policy has impacted in particular areas and how in general a society behave, and then I felt reconnected to what I was always passionate about. So I would say that at some point I was kind of diverted from what mattered to me the most. At the end, it has always been about like, giving back to the community or bringing a change. And I know I could bring change if I was a doctor, but I realized that there is a larger sphere that I can actually intervene or maybe become a part of as a agent of change. So that is when um, I realized that, okay, this is me. I have reconnected with myself, and I didn't know how to express this self to my parents because they would be like, hey, you have invested so much of your time studying for this, and now you are telling me this. Are you fine or what? So instead of just like trying to convey them this new discovery that I had about myself, I just try to see if what I believe would also be, if I'd be able to convey that to the universities that where I want to study, and luckily, or they saw what it took me to study in that area, and eventually I ended up there, and then the rest was just like trying to convince my parents.
So this whole thing of the medical school thing, first of all, congratulations on even getting into that because that was great. But I also love the fact that your story exemplifies something that I think we rarely ever talk about. There's this differentiation between what you're good at versus what you love to do. Most of the time, what you love to do is what you are good at, but sometimes what you're good at is not what you love to do. And it's funny because like some cultures are heavy STEM cultures. It's like, hey, you need to be a doctor, an engineer, a nurse. You need to be doing something to save the world. And I think especially like being Gen Z, there was this whole thing of, STEM is the future. You need to be in one of these fields. And people who are not in those fields can sometimes feel guilty. It's like, oh, well, I'm not in this field. I feel kind of guilty, especially when we look at it from a gender equity perspective. There's not a lot of women in STEM. So a lot of women who are in STEM feel like, I have to lift up other women and I have to, other people are seeing me as an example and a role model. And sometimes that limits us from doing what we really know we're supposed to do. I always say we don't need any mediocre anything. So I would rather see someone be an excellent writer than be a mediocre doctor. I think the world needs I love people who lead and live with passion. And I think the world needs more people who lead and live with passion and actually like what they do. I remember being younger and being like, I don't know if I like adulthood because I remembered seeing all the adults around me be, I don't want to say depressed, but they were like walking zombies. Like they did not really love what they did. And I promised myself that when I became an adult, I would go out there and do what I loved to do. I would search for what I loved to do. And people always thought I was like so spiritual or so extra. But in reality, I just really am the type of person. I think I'm very similar to you in that like I want the purpose. I want to feel connected to something bigger than myself. And everyone is not that way. So I don't feel guilty for being this way because I know like the world does not need me to be a doctor. I was also on that, people for me it was like you're going to be either pre-med or you're going to be pre-law or you're going to be pre some sort of profession. And today I have this podcast because I don't really have a defined profession. And I struggle with that because it's like, even though I am this woman that I am, courageous, go out there, do what I do, I still was raised under this environment of like, oh, well, you need to have a professional title to be
Right.
seen as someone. And I still have to work through that mentally, like, oh my God, I don't need a professional title to be a boss, to be who I am. But it still is at the back of my mind sometimes because that was how I was raised. So I love how you talked about just your process. And I think because you were able to go through that process of making that switch, a lot more people who are listening to this are going to be, I always say, like 1% braver because they're going to realize, hey, well, I'm on a path that just isn't for me. And either I'm going to like quit that path. I mean, quitting sometimes is a good thing, right? Quit that path and do what I know my heart wants me to do, or I'm going to be mediocre and average at that career, not because I can't do it, but because I just don't love it. My heart's not into it, you know?
I would also say it's quite difficult for a lot of people to know what they're really passionate about. And that's why I
Mm.
emphasize on trying new experiences, new opportunities, right? Like for me, it was like before even deciding if I want to go to this is a career that I want to pursue, I had several things going around. I had experienced few things. So how was your experience? I'm actually curious because you said that you wanted, you could have been a pre-med, you could have been the pre-law, but then you have taken a different path. Was there any kind of experiences, like, like self-discovery at such a young age, and which is something that not everybody do? Was there something like that?
Yeah, so there was a lot of that. Thank you. Socrates interviewing me too. I love that. No, there was a lot of that. So first and foremost, I grew up being good at science. So I always felt like, oh, well, I'm gonna do something in the sciences. I really loved chemistry and biology, really loved life sciences. And everyone kind of saw me as like, she's smart enough to be
Mm-hmm.
doctor, judge, she's smart enough to be all these things. But I remember feeling like the one thing that really lit me up growing up and, in a good way, made me feel that passion was when I was in leadership. So I always gravitated towards leadership roles. And I always said growing up that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And it's funny because I'm the daughter of an engineer and a nurse. I did not come from a business family. I didn't see it in front of me, but I always said, it's my passion to it was my passion to lead. Like whatever I would do, whether it was organizing a dance team for the talent show or student government, I was always in leadership. And then not just like leadership like like a student chair. I was pretty much always the president. So I don't want to brag on myself now. But I was student body president in middle school and in high school. So it just shows you that over that 4-year period from 13 to 17, I still was a leader. Like that was always in me. I always had a drive to be a leader. So I figured, where do you go when I was applying to college, I was like, where do the leaders go? And my mom was like, business degree, question marks. And even I, like to this day, I don't really know why I chose business, but I felt like I needed to choose business. Ended up applying, got into all the business majors I applied for. So I figured like it was God because I believe in God. It was God saying, well, I want you to be on this path. So I ended up going to the Wharton School for undergrad. And even then, the doors have continued to open, continue to open. I'm not going to say being a woman entrepreneur is not tough. It's very tough, especially I'm going to be vulnerable on this podcast and say, especially being a Black woman entrepreneur, it's very tough. And as young as I am, I started at 21. I remember I started my first organization November 13th, 2022, like 2 weeks before I turned 22. And it's been very tough. People think I'm too young. People think I'm not smart enough. People think I'm not good enough. And I think that this is the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's the most fulfilling thing. So I feel like for me, I always kind of knew who I would want it to be, but I think the world was waiting on me to rise up to that purpose. And then I talk about a lot of other things about like how I, left my job and all this other, I was a mess, but I
Yeah.
feel like I always kind of knew what I wanted to be. I needed to accept that. I
Hmm.
needed to accept that, I'm an entrepreneur and that's okay. That's how I get it. I needed to give myself that time because I always knew, but I was battling like even when I was in college. So my college is very like professional oriented. I battled that. Like I battled myself because it's like, well, I don't have the six-figure job everyone else has. Am I a failure? Like and I battled myself with that. but I realized that this is my purpose. From I was a kid, this is my purpose. So I've always kept on going,
That's really nice. I think it reminds me of one of the session from the Lead Next Fellowship, what Nicole did a diagram about self-awareness, and then comes the self-acceptance. We are aware of what we want. Like I mentioned earlier, that I always knew I was interested in this area, but then I was diverted for a while, right? But then I had to come back and accept. And I think self-acceptance is very important, and I love it how you put it out there.
Yeah, I think self-acceptance is so important. I want to know, like, how did Japan change you? Because I feel like that college experience is so important in our lives and so vital to the development of a woman, to the development of a woman's psyche and soul. So I really want to know, like, when you moved to Japan, how did you evolve during this time? And what were the gifts of Japan? Like, what did Japan unleash in you that wasn't there before?
Um, the first and most important thing was not just Japan, it would be because I just moved out of my comfort zone, would be independence, you know. Experiencing that independency at that age was something, a big privilege for somebody from this kind of society, because I was told by a lot of people, there was a moment that I never forget this. Like somebody, when I got my Japan visa, one of the person, very distant relative to me, said it to me like, hey, how about you get married and take a guy with you in the dependent visa along with? That way your life will be easier there. I remember being so furious with that person. I remember hating him so much for saying that. I fought all these times with my parents, with everything that I believed. I discovered myself to finally get my independent decision making. And now you are telling me that this would be better for you. Oh my God. So going there and becoming so independent, whether it's financially, right? Something that was new for me, because in Nepal we don't really have a tradition of doing part-time job during high school, which I saw in Japan actually. A lot of people being so financially independent through high school in some ways. So first thing was being independent. And then with independence, it come like all the decisions are made by you. Nobody's gonna tell me which club to join. Nobody's gonna tell me where to travel in Japan. Nobody's gonna tell me who your friends should be. So that was something very beautiful. And on top of that, I would say although I would say like my university was very multicultural, it had more than a student from more than 90 countries. So they brought in this um, like big diversity of people from which we could learn. So not just limited to the class, but also from the friends around me, the friends that I met in Japan, really brought in very new way of living, new way of pursuing what I was all what I believe, new perspective. That was amazing. And then again, uh, the most important I would say is the the society and the culture of Japan, which was completely a different experience for me. How much they are so humble. The Japanese people are so humble. They express a gratitude to the people. I believe I learned how to express my gratitude to the people. Although my culture actually believe in those sort of things, but I was not probably practicing. And then there I learned about why you should be humble to people, because nobody ever shouted at me, nobody ever hurt me, none of the Japanese people I was with, wherever it was in a part-time job, whether it was in university. So all these things really helped me to um, to build like new competencies in me. And along with that, another competency I would say is like to lead a team. Japanese universities and Japanese workspace really push you towards like teamwork, group work. A lot of my assignments were suddenly all group work, because before I went to Japan, I was everything was like I did everything by myself. So I used to do my everything that I achieved was just that I did it all by myself. But being in Japan, the institutions and the society really taught me that you are not alone in the society. You have to work in a team. And I remember first year in my university, I was like, I even went to complain to my professor, like, hey, professor, I prefer to do this task alone. And she made me sit down in front of her and she told me, like, this is what we believe in Japan. We believe in teamwork. We believe that throughout your period in your university, we are supporting you for a smooth transition to your workspace. And in a workspace, you don't work alone. So you have to learn these competencies. And yeah, those sort of things, I would say, like, overall, it was the culture, the experience, the first-hand experience of what Japanese culture looked like, and again about being independent, and also it's different sort of competencies that came along during the 4 years experience in Japan.
No, I love, okay, I really love everything you said, except that comment about the person who told you that you need to be married. Like, what? Honestly,
I
that definitely is very,
I
yeah,
know,
that's
I know.
sad.
And I
Yeah.
didn't get that a lot of time, like coming back from Japan, people thought that I wasn't successful, and that's why I returned back to Nepal. For me, it was the reason
Mm.
why I returned back to Nepal was like I wanted to pursue the career in the area of Nepal's policy, and I knew I couldn't do that from Japan, although I had a good job opportunity which I rejected in Japan, and I came back here. So, um, and again, to this day, people see that, oh, probably she wasn't successful enough, so she returned back instead of staying there. And very recently, somebody again told me, like, hey, it's time to get married. That's something that you would,
Oh my God.
a lot of my
Yuck.
friends, yeah, a lot of my friends hear it so many times. When you are 25, people think that you no longer can pursue a career. You have to focus on, you know, making a family and working for your family. It's no longer for you. And these kind of ideas are constantly instilled by the people around me. And oh my God,
Yeah. I,
this is a
I, I feel like it's amazing. It's amazing what Japan gave you in terms of just the confidence outlook, that sense of cultural belonging, gratitude, all of the cultural values you were able to take on, but also this sense of not having to be under like the marriage microscope. Are you married? When are you getting married? And honestly, like the sad thing about like the society for women is that even at 22 years old, there's pressure on me to be married. Like, and honestly, it doesn't make any sense because I'm like, well, do you see the men getting married at my age? Absolutely not. But there's all this pressure put on women all the time to like be married. And I love how you talked about the fact that even at the expense of having your own career, there's pressure to be married because it's like, oh, well, as a woman, this is what you're supposed to do. This is who you're supposed to be. And I believe that marriage is a beautiful and wonderful thing, but I don't think it has an age limit. And I hate how, society makes us feel like, oh, if you are past a certain age and you're not married, da 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 da, all this garbage. And it's like, well, marriage doesn't have an age limit. You can get married at any time in your life. And what I want for women is for us to prioritize ourselves in the process of dating and marriage. Like, I feel like doing it your way and, is we're making sure that you actually are happy is the best thing to do because no, I feel like a miserable marriage is definitely a bad marriage. And oftentimes, not necessarily because you don't like each other, it's really because like you don't feel like you got the chance to be yourself or you never got the chance to enjoy your life.
right.
And I think in societies like Nepal and then some, even some American sectors or sects, it can be a lot like, I expect you to do this. This is the societal expectation. But in reality, I really love the fact that we as women can take charge of our destinies today and we can get married when we want to get married. And I just hate that, like, I hate that they were telling you like bring a man to Japan. Like, what? No, Japan is about you.
Exactly.
Um,
Don't take that away from me. But like, don't even give your opinion in the first place. I didn't ask for one, right?
Eh, that's facts. That's fact because you didn't ask for one. And I always feel like oh my God, like a young woman prioritizing herself, that is what we're supposed to do. Like I think a lot of us especially in certain societies, not because our mothers got married young or our grandmothers did, was what meant that it was necessarily the best thing for them. They did it because, especially back then, times were different, right? Women did not have the agency they have today. So I always say, like, you have to be a 21st century woman. We have so many options. There's so much agency. Make sure that before you do get married, you live your life and you enjoy your life. Yeah,
That is
I
true.
love that.
And that's something that Japan rewarded me. And ever since what happened to Japan, ever since like my experience in Japan, I have learned to demand what I want. I have learned to say no. I have learned to express what is more important to me to the people. And these days, people are scared to just give me all through all these sort of comments. They think twice, at least.
Yeah, no, they definitely think twice because you're letting them know like you're not here for it. And I
Yeah.
love that. I really love that. I love like the unapologetic, I call it unapologetic energy that a lot of us young women have. I love that we're like, hey, I'm not here for even your questions. Keep it to yourself. I love that. So I want to circle back on this thing of you coming back to Nepal. One of the questions I have for you is like after Japan, what was your career blueprint? Where did you envision yourself starting your career, and why did you decide to go back to Nepal?
So I would say that when I was applying for jobs in Japan, which was actually very easy in compare with my experience applying to job in Nepal. So at that time, I had realization that this is a period of my life where I am so curious. I'm not scared to make mistakes. So, and at this point, I need to pursue what matters to what matters the most to me. The other option was just like working in some companies in Japan. I had offer from really good companies in Japan, and with a really good pay range, which is something that is could be very important when you're living in a least developed country like Nepal, right? So, but then I asked myself, will I be satisfied with this? Maybe in 2 years' time, I could just like earn, save a few money and go back to Nepal. But I will be losing a very good 2 year of my life, which I could invest in what matters to me the most. And even while during my time in Japan, I had work in the areas that inclined towards giving back to Nepal. I had few projects that allowed me to come back to Nepal and connect with the communities, especially underprivileged communities in Nepal. And then, so I would say like because I always knew that I have something to give back to the community of where I belong to, and I didn't want it to lose a very beautiful, early 20s, just being like, strolling around in the areas that didn't really matter to me the most. So that is what changed me, brought me back to
Yeah. I feel like it's this thing of where you were versus where you knew you could impact. And I think that's exactly what drove you back. And I hate that you talked about the fact that certain people were seeing it as a regression. They were seeing it as, well, oh, you're living this progressive life. Why are you coming back? But I see it as that's where your heart was. That's where your people are. That's where you were directly connected to the issues, especially for like a policy career or a political career. You want to operate in the context you best understand. And I think that's something that I think a lot about, like the one that you're tied to. Of course, there are people that like lobby for interests outside of their own, but that never really feels authentic. So I feel like there's also probably some authenticity in that decision, as well, to decide to go back. Because I don't necessarily have that story, but I relate to it because when I went away to college, right? And then I came to live back in my hometown. And a lot of people are like, well, why didn't you move to LA or Chicago, or why didn't you move to New York City? And I live right outside of New York City. But I came back to my hometown because I felt like in this season of my life, I needed to be here. And I just want to let anybody know, like, I have not missed out on opportunities because I moved back home. Like, that did not happen. What happened is that I gained a sense of groundedness that I didn't have before. So I was able to it takes coming back and like living in my like high school bedroom, and it gave me a perspective of who I was before college. It reminded me of who I was. In a very powerful way, I gained that in reintroduction back to myself, because college did a number on me, in both good and bad ways. And I think I needed to come back because I needed to be grounded in, the girl that I was, the big dreamer I was, the person who wanted to do all these things in the world. And I regained that fire within me that I would say my younger self had. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing today, because I made sure to come back to my roots. And I feel like that's what it was for you too. Like you wanted to come back to your roots where it all began, you know?
And it is very rewarding. It was very rewarding because I get to connect with people who are working in the similar area. I get to learn from them. I get to build my own social capital, which is very important for somebody working in this area, right? And I would have lost that if I was in Japan still working a corporate life, I would say, because that's the kind of job that I had ended up there, right? So very rewarding, I would say. And I never regret a bit of it. Although people constantly ask me like why come back? Because that's a trend in Nepal. Like people go abroad here. You might have met a lot of Nepali people in America as well. Like they've established their family there and they've even like withdrawn Nepali citizenship to become an American. And that's everywhere around. They're just not just limited to America because the situation back here in Nepal is not very welcoming for young people as well, especially young people who do not come from very, uh, like a very well privileged family background. For those people, you have to start from scratch. You would have to struggle. And I had a similar experience. It wasn't easy coming back, realizing that the job market here is not welcoming for me, realizing that I didn't even know where I could even apply for the job, where was a vacancy. Because in Japan, I knew I could just go to the website of the company. It tells me what kind of job it is. It tells me like everything about, even including how much I'm getting paid. But here, I don't even know where the jobs opening are. I had to start as an intern, and that was a really lowest point in my life because dropped a very well paying full time job to become an intern here. But I I just had to find peace with it and like convince myself that okay, you are learning. It's okay. You're learning, but in few months' time you will be somewhere where you want to be. And honestly, not gonna lie, and this is the best decision I've made.
Yeah, no, first of all, I find it crazy that you became an intern. Like that, no, that's crazy, but that's a testament to your passion though. I feel like it's so odd that there's so many parallels between your experience and mine. So I don't want to say I turned down higher paying jobs, but I got to keep it real on my own podcast. Yes, I did. And I turned it down to live in my hometown, to be an entrepreneur here. And a lot of people see that as, are you crazy? Like, are you crazy for turning this down? I remember when I was in college and I told someone that I wasn't going to apply to the career accelerator or whatever. And they were like, oh, are you nuts? And I was just thinking, people think I'm crazy, but I got to deal with that and know that I'm not crazy. I just want something different for myself. And I love how you talked about how you started as an intern because you weren't afraid to get your hands dirty. I think sometimes we feel like because we're college educated, certain things are beneath us. It's beneath me to be an entrepreneur. It's beneath me to be an intern. It's beneath me to be an assistant. But in certain industries and sectors, you got to climb your way. You're not going to start at the top. You gotta climb your way. And I think that I love to see young people like us with the grit to say, okay, I will start as an assistant. I think a lot about the media and entertainment industry in America. It doesn't matter how educated you are. If you want to break in, you got to be a production assistant. So you got to be the person who gets the coffee and gets the bottles of water and organizes the scripts and puts them on the table. And some people would say, well, you're a glorified slave, but you're in an industry, you're in a community. You talked about social capital. You're in a network that can propel you forward. And I think that is really valuable. Gaining roots, I think, is what you should spend your 20s doing.
Right.
Yeah.
And I say that to a lot of
Mhm.
people. A lot of my friends who are still asking me so many advices about like, should they even come back? Like, And I asked them, do you see yourself in few years in Nepal? Do you feel like you wanna give back to Nepal? Then yes, come as soon as you can. Because I believe that if I had studied in I actually acknowledge this fact that if I had studied in Nepal, I would have a bigger social capital, right? I would have understand the context of Nepal much better than the way I am right now. But then my experience abroad is also bringing the new perspective in it, and to show to the people around here what the norm, like what we have is not normal. And once until and unless you're not exposed to a normal scenario, you wouldn't know what the normal is, right? So those kind of perspective I'm bringing it. So um, yeah, obviously it was difficult, but look where we are, both of us are the lead next fellow at the Asia Foundation. So definitely we took a right path.
Yeah, no, we did. And even Lead Next is like I was not even gonna apply, but I said, you know what? Something was pushing me forward. And I feel like it's that intuition of you talked a lot about social capital, but what I would say is that you didn't just have social capital, you had international capital. And you had intercultural capital.
Yeah,
And I feel like there are many different ways to have wealth. And of course, there's trade offs, but staying in one industry and developing roots, while you should do that, don't be afraid to also go to different places, meet different people. I applied to Lead Next and I do not speak a word of Chinese or Mandarin, excuse me. I do not speak a word of any of the languages. And I was thinking, like, I remember I was in the interview asking, do I need to be able to speak, like listing all the Asian languages? And they were like, no, you don't have to speak any of those languages. I was like, okay, this is an English program. Cool. But what I'm learning from you all is that in spite of cultural barriers, we really are not as we're not as different as we think we are. And even my experience, I think some people with my experience, it can be like, being a Black woman in America is really tough. But I can say that I've met people who have been through similar colorism things and different issues within their culture that kind of mirror my own. So I was like, wow, well, certain things are not necessarily an American issue. They're human rights issues.
right.
And look bigger, think bigger. I think that's what Lead Next is teaching me, like, look bigger, think bigger about what you want your impact to be. I was just thinking, I just want to be, USA, like gung ho. But I'm meeting people who have lived abroad and like who are expanding my mind. So I'm really grateful for this conversation. And I'm grateful to have met people like you, Prakriti, as well, who are expanding my mind and my sense of what is possible. So my last question before we close out is the title of this episode is Well Behaved Women Don't Make History. How do you plan to continue to misbehave in the name of progress, freedom, and gender equality?
I would say I would never stop demanding what is rightfully mine, and I would teach others to do that, whether it at family, it at workspace. I would make sure that women uplift together. At this point right now, I'm also forming alliances of women who have interests in similar areas so that we can all grow together. It's very important because men have their alliances all the time, but we ask, do women actually have alliances, especially when you're working in the area of policy and politics? You don't work there alone. You need to have a team. And we all are addressing gender issues, and we all are victim of gender issues in some ways. So I am forming that group of people. I'm inviting others to join, and at the same time, I am teaching whoever I meet that, hey, once upon a time, I demand what I believed in, and that's what took me here. It's okay to demand what you want. Start demanding that, then only people are gonna be like, people are gonna see this as a normative behavior. Don't be shy as a woman. Just be bold, be yourself, and explore
Yeah.
everything, explore all the opportunities that is presented on your table, because it's rewarding. Each opportunity will teach you a lesson that you take throughout your life. Each opportunity will help you be closer to your North Star. Yes, just explore.
Yeah, no, I love that. Be bold and explore. Yeah, no, I really, really do love that. And I love how you talked about women forming alliances because I think that we don't have enough of those. And even in the sister, quote unquote, sister circles that we have, there's backbiting, there's jealousy, there's I want to be on top, I want to be the queen bee, and you need to be beneath me. There's a lot of, toxic dynamics in even women oriented circles that prevent us from really truly standing in alliance and alignment with each other. So I really love that. For me, what I'm taking from this conversation and how I plan to continue to misbehave, I just plan to continue to take up space. And I will be that loud woman. Yes, I will. I will be that crazy woman. Yes, I will. I will be the woman that is different and does different things. Yes, I will. I plan to blaze a trail for women like myself to see themselves represented at the highest levels and understand your originality matters, your creativity matters, your vision matters, and
Right.
hold on to what matters, because if you work hard enough, your dreams can come true. And I think that's how I plan to continue to misbehave. Just continue to follow my dreams and that vision that God has given me to live out in the world. I think that's the highest level of misbehaving. And in that misbehavior, I'll continue to empower women to accept more, to be their fullest selves, and also, like you said, stand in alignment with each other, support each other. All right, y'all. That was a good conversation.
Right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It is really helping me to reflect my own journey, because most of the time we miss out the conversation, and it is really important to have the conversation, right? And thank you for creating this platform and inviting somebody who has never appeared in the podcast before.
Yeah, no, I truly believe you have to have the beginner's mind. So there's a first time for everything. And yeah, all right, y'all. Take care.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's me, Soraya, again. What a powerful message. I really did enjoy this episode, and I also enjoyed listening to it. I hope you gain a lot of insights from this episode and this conversation that we had on what it means to really be young women, charting our own path and really following our own course. Any thoughts? We would definitely love to hear from you. Make sure to remember that episodes of The Purse Professional will be released every Sunday. Let us know what you want to hear from us. Answer the Spotify poll. Also, follow the podcast, share, let people know that you're listening. Wishing you a life and career with great purpose. Until next time, everyone. Bye.